Tanto blades! These suckers took the knife world by storm for decades. The notorious boxy, angular, square, sharp, geometrical looking blades we see flooding the folding knife and even fixed blade markets. These things are all over the place. What I want to do today is show you a few variations within Tanto blades, as well as give you my opinions on them and what I feel are objectively good things about the Tanto blades that other blade styles do not excel as much at. Tanto blades do have advantages over the more typical traditional blade styles, the buoy or clip point, drop point, spear point. You can start getting into cleavers and recurves, but overall I'd say of all the blade styles out there, just underneath the typical clip point, drop point, even spear point for that matter, I think the Tanto is almost as popular. It's just a notch beneath those. You're going to hear a lot of different things. Many people say Tanto blades are useless, that they're nothing more than a gimmick. I completely disagree. In case you haven't noticed, I am pronouncing it Tanto, not Tanto. In my older videos, I used to pronounce it Tanto, and then later I switched to Tanto, thinking that Tanto is actually the incorrect pronunciation. But after doing some research, it turns out Tanto actually is the correct pronunciation. Traditionally, that is how you would say it in Japan, which is where the Tanto blade originates from. Yes, I know the Lone Ranger character is spelled T-O-N-T-O, while Tanto, the blade style, is spelled T-A-N-T-O. Yeah, I know, that sucks, but we're taking a Japanese word and converting it into English, so Tanto is the correct way to say it. However, I'm not going to judge you if you say Tanto either. Regardless, the main advantage that Tanto blade has over a non-Tanto blade is this secondary tip we have right here. All of the blades you're looking at right here, except for one, see if you can spot it, have a secondary tip. That's our first tip we pierce with, and then we have the secondary tip rather than a belly being where the tip curves as it connects to the very end of the cutting edge. Instead of having a belly, many Tanto blades will just forego that almost entirely and instead have a secondary tip. Now this is more of a traditional style Tanto folder. Everything else you're seeing right here are more Americanized Tanto blades. This right here is closer to the original traditional Tanto blade from Japan. It's a lot less extreme. It still has two portions to it as far as the cutting edge is concerned. We have a more abrupt belly right here that kind of stops and it becomes flush, almost like a Warncliffe all the way down here. But right around here is where it starts to curve back up into the tip. The rest of these, though, have very, very distinct secondary tips, as you can see there. So why would you want this secondary tip? Well, as far as everyday carry purposes go, I find that extremely helpful for doing the slicing motion, which many of us do on almost a daily basis if we're using our knives at all. We're cutting open stuff, slicing, opening packages. It's always this motion. The secondary tip is perfect for that. In fact, I prefer it over a belly. This you can really pierce and dig in there for that task. Now, as far as less mundane tasks are concerned, when we get into defense, I also like the Tanto because we have a very, very objectively strong tip right here by their sheer design. The overall geometry of the tip is extremely strong. You can see how thick it is right here. It tapers off to become a tip, to become a single point, obviously, but just by looking at the grinds on here, it's very, very thick towards the tip. Tantos specifically have very objectively strong tips, so they're very good for piercing, very good for stabbing. And then going back to defense, the secondary tip they have is also very good specifically for the impact cut. I'm not going to give you a demonstration for this video, but whacking that secondary tip and recoiling back leaves a very, very large gaping wound from the sheer shock because of that secondary tip, taking advantage of that. One thing a lot of people don't like about Tantos, and I kind of agree, is that sharpening them can be somewhat of a bitch because we have two edges here. If you're freehand sharpening these things, you do not want to just sharpen them as if you're imagining a single curved cutting edge. We have two essentially Warncliffe style cutting edges here. They're usually almost completely flush. Some of these have very, very minor bellies like this. That's not entirely flush. It's close, but it's not 100% straight. There's a little bit of belly there, just barely. But even then, I still consider these to be two practically flush cutting edges. So you have to do two passes if you want both cutting edges to be sharpened. Yeah, it's somewhat of a disadvantage as far as that goes. However, they're easy to resharpen even if they take longer because you don't have to mind your form as much since they're straight edges typically. So I still don't really care that much about that. And you can see a little bit of variation in these Americanized Tanto blades. A lot of variation in this one right here, obviously, because that's a traditional style one, but some of these have much more acute points where they take advantage of the swedge or even just the spine of the blade and have it taper down and meet the tip. As you can see, these two, they're more like spear point Tantos. Most of these have a much more obtuse angle. Going back to the Voyager right here, you can see the spine's almost completely straight. Then on others, you'll have the spine be angled down towards the tip. This one right here is one you don't really see as often anymore. It's the old model Cold Steel Recon 1, but I'm a huge fan of this style Tanto. More of a symmetrical triangular shape, so we have less resistance and will be even better for piercing, although you could argue it's technically not going to be as strong. That's the trade-off. I think they're both really, really cool looking. These three right here in particular have that style Tanto, which is not quite as common as this style Tanto that you see most of the time. But I just figured I'd show you that little variation right there. So let's recap. Absolutely love Tanto blades. I think they're great for everyday carry purposes because of that secondary tip. They're also one of the best fighting / combat / martial / defensive blades, I argue. Very strong tip. And that secondary tip down there can be used for impact cutting. These are going to be great for gouging, twisting, prying, just because we have so much strength up here because of their geometry. You see how wide this portion is compared to most other blades. And above all, if all else fails, I think they're pretty damn cool looking. I think Tanto blades are extremely sexy. I've always thought they were cool looking. And to this day, they're still overall my favorite blade style. What do you like about Tantos? What do you dislike about Tantos? Are there any uses and advantages I missed in this video? Are there any disadvantages I missed in this video? Please let me know in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching. Feel free to subscribe, hit that little bell notification if you do not want to miss weekly knife and gun videos. Thank you so much for watching. Mannix out.